Hi, welcome you guys. I'm so excited to be diving into this topic today. We will be discussing how to really break through the noise and drive B2B growth with hyper-personalization. We're going to be covering a lot of ground today, and I'm joined by two incredible thought leaders on the subject, Mike Felix and Duessa Holscher. Mike is a solutions consultant and sales engineer at Act On. Mike is a solutions-oriented leader, currently serving as a sales engineer, a business developer, and tech community advocate with over a decade of engineering, web design development, and marketing and digital sales experience within public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Wow. Wow, Mike. Also with us today is Duessa, who is a principal product manager at Act On. Duessa is a passionate and entrepreneurial product manager with expertise in delivering solutions that help businesses thrive. Duessa loves working with customers to understand their needs and collaborating across the organization to just deliver outstanding results. So thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to dive in. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mike to get the ball rolling.
Sweet, sweet. All right. So there's going to be a theme that you're going to be hearing throughout this presentation. And that theme, essentially, underneath all of these, I would say, pretty sophisticated words, is going to be that we're trying to leverage automation to create a very human experience en masse, right? So we're leveraging marketing automation technology to be able to communicate with people in a way that if we were speaking to a friend, there's a bunch of data points and there are a lot of experiences and there's an environment that enables you to have a highly contextualized conversation with someone, right? So we're trying to do that en masse. And that requires us to do a few things, which we'll cover today. One of the first things is we're going to differentiate between basic and advanced personalization, like what we thought was amazing years ago and what we're finding to become or to be amazing now. That leads us into being able to activate the right data and channels to be able to execute on this, right? So all of this enables us to, again, have a very human conversation through leveraging behavioral, demographic, firmographic data and leveraging AI, automation, and segmentation to be able to achieve all of this as well. Now, if we were to look back years ago, there was a time when if you saw your name in an email subject line, you were like, wow, this person must know me. And you would open the email and you would see your name again at the top of the email. And you're like, wow, this person is speaking to me. Those days they're still here, but it doesn't have the same effect as it used to, right? So those are what we consider to be surface level details. Your name, your job title, your industry, your company, anything you can typically find on LinkedIn, that's just what you can use to do personalization. But that was sort of like a one size fits most messaging, but it doesn't resonate the same as it used to. We consider that platform space to be static segmentation. These are details that just don't change very often. But now we're evolving into this space where we're leveraging hyper personalization. So this would be dynamic segmentation. We're leveraging behavioral data, intent data, real-time data that we're ingesting, we're processing, and we're using it to be able to have a more dynamic conversation and a dynamic set of content that we're delivering to an audience so that we could lead them in a particular direction.
Hey, Mike, one great example of that I always think of when you're talking about this hyper personalization is what we see today with some of the streaming services. I don't know about you, but I have subscriptions to all of them, and I'm constantly getting messages, whether it's emails or notifications or text messages that say things like, hey, reminder, we have new episodes that just dropped of Black Mirror, or you just finished watching The Last of Us. Well, this is what you might want to watch instead or as your next show. Did you like the comedian that you just watched on that special? Here's more like it. Or are you enjoying Alone Australia? You haven't finished it. You have 5 more episodes left. So there's a lot of super personalized information there where those services know exactly what I've been watching, how much of it I've finished, and what my preferences are. And it enables them to create a really personal, tailored experience, a really personalized experience that makes me always want to open those emails and see what else they have on offer. So that's a great example that I think as business leaders, and we maybe don't have quite as exciting of data as some of those streamers have, but the more we can emulate that in terms of getting really personal and really connected to what our users are signaling with their intents and their behaviors, you're going to get better responses. A recent study showed that things have really changed in the last 10 or 15 years in terms of how buyers approach the buying cycle. And this is really impacting why we want to personalize through the marketing experience. So 70% of the business to business buyer's journey is now completed with research they're doing on their own before they even talk to salespeople. But only 11% of marketers have fully automated journeys that bring in this kind of personalization. So if you think back in the old days when we had salespeople that were really engaged along the whole process, I know I used to work with a salesperson who was selling business software, but all he ever talked about with his customers were things like Little League and family activities and how the kids were doing and where they were going on vacation. He got to know these customers so well that they didn't hardly even talk about the product, but in the end, he was the trusted source that they would come to when they were ready to buy. He was able to use personalization because he's a person and could have these one-on-one conversations and really connect with people. But when you don't have that salesperson involved in the first 3 quarters of the journey, then we need to find other ways to connect to people using that personal information. So you can improve the trust that your customers have with your organization based on the information that they've given you and the information that then you can give it back to them and respond to them on.
Right, right. Absolutely. And just to add another pin to that, going all the way back to the title, right? The modern buyer behaves very differently now. Like we're trying to minimize the noise. There were certain channels that used to be unique years ago, but it's very common now. So it's important for you to be able to rise above the noise by being as personal as possible. And well, in this case, hyper personal. Now, there's a data point that says 49% of marketers, they've claimed that poor data is their top obstacle to effective personalization. I would argue that that number is most likely a bit higher, primarily because it's poor data in, poor messaging out, right? And there are still a lot of marketers that are leveraging, I would say, sort of legacy channels to be able to communicate with their audience. But as we start to see more marketers lean into leveraging AI, leveraging advanced segmentation, we're going to start to realize that your level of personalization is going to have to begin to increase. So if you can outpace your competition, you're going to be the ones to accelerate that relationship building so that you can ensure that, again, you're leading them in the right direction. It takes a lot of data to achieve this, right? Like, think about if you were having a conversation with a friend, right? Like a friend that you've known for 15 years. You know whether or not your friend likes scary movies. You know whether or not your friend likes ice cream. You know whether or not your friend is allergic to peanut butter. Like, there's certain things that you know. And if you were to ask your friend, what are you doing this weekend? Right. Well, you know, they're not going to go to the peanut butter festival, right? You know, they're not going to do certain things because the weather may be bad. You know, they're not going to go to electronic dance festival because they have 3 kids, right? Like there's certain things that you're processing make your messaging make sense. Well, in this case, when you're trying to automate this en masse, you're processing behavioral data, who they are, but also what they've done. You're processing their firmographic data, their demographic data. You're processing their intent data. There are mass databases of intent data that's showing that, hey, this individual has been reading up on these particular topics and they've opted into this webinar and they've subscribed to this particular media outlet. And all of those are different intent signals that could provide you with a little bit of insight into how you may want to communicate with them and where they may be in their buyer's journey. And of course, you have your own data, your custom data. You have information that you've inputted into your CRM. If you have a sales team that's reaching out to them and they've indicated, let's say it's a specific customer, and they indicated that, hey, like our fiscal year starts in February. We normally get our government contracts, our disbursements in September. We're in academia. We don't have anything to do for the summer. Like now, all of a sudden, all of these inputs can also enable you to identify what data sources are fueling your personalization and your utility of it.
Hey, Mike, I see a lot of tension that our customers are concerned about how much data they can try to collect from their contacts. So if they have someone filling out a form, for example, they don't want to put too many questions on that form because it's going to lower response rate and submission rate, but they want to get enough information to help really personalize their responses. How do you think, do you have any thoughts on how to balance that tension between how much data you can collect from your customers and where the trade-off is there between lowering response rates?
Great question. Great question. I mean, there are definitely a few ways to approach that. Another trend that we're seeing when it comes to capturing data from prospects and from visitors is that the expectation on the other side of that exchange is starting to increase. Right? Like years ago, it was opt into my newsletter. And now it's like, why? Give me your name, phone number, address, and your children's middle names for this ebook. Why, right? But now what we're seeing is people are opting in for things that have greater value. So that's one thing. If you're going to ask a bit more, you have to expect that, or you have to know that your audience is expecting a lot more. But the other thing that we're seeing, and this is something that we're seeing within our customers, is we're leveraging technology to progressively profile contacts. So because we're able to leverage first party data and we're able to have a database that's growing, but at the same time, we're capturing all of their behavioral data, we're using that so that it's not about getting all of the information all at once. We're saying, hey, well, I'm just going to ask you for your name and phone number or your name and email address now. And I'm going to retarget you to bring you back to some asset within the next week. But at that point, I'll ask you, maybe what month your birthday is in or what type of products you typically consume. So I'm still building on what I know about you. I'm not asking you to marry me on the first date, right? Like I'm going through and I'm progressively profiling you over time so that it's a more human engagement.
That makes a lot of sense. I also think that it's important when customers do give you information, it's really important to use it. It's kind of building that trust between the customer. So if I fill out information on your website that tells you what my budget is, what industry I'm in, what type of product line I'm interested in, what my needs are, and then you start sending me a bunch of generic information that doesn't have anything to do with what I was interested in, that's going to turn me off to your company as a whole because I'm not going to feel like you're listening to me, that you care about my needs. So if you're asking for data, be sure that you're thinking about how are you actually going to use that information to tailor the experience and show that trust that your customer can rightly place trust in you to respond to their needs. It's a great opportunity to kind of show that before the sale.
1,000%.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about how all of this comes together. We have all this data we were talking about that comes from all sorts of different places, whether it's information you're collecting directly or that you're supplementing with other sources. And you want to deliver that message in the right place, in the right time, through all the right channels. So you have email, of course, SMS, social, direct mail, any of the digital platform channels that you might want to target that customer with. And so in the middle there is the automation, and the automation lets you really personalize that experience, not just once, and not just kind of, oh, I'm going to send a newsletter out about XYZ topic, but on an ongoing basis where as a customer shows intent for a particular topic or a particular product, they can get enrolled in an automation that uses that information to create the right message and the right series of messages across the right channels to help bring that customer back and move them down the sales cycle. So bringing it all together, it's not enough to just try to do it one time. You really need to be able to set up programs that are going to be repeatable and are going to be able to let your marketing team scale this on a personalized level.
Absolutely. And it's important to automate the right things as well. I always say it's easy to do the right thing the wrong way. You could also do the wrong thing the right way. It's important to do the right thing the right way. So when you leaning into automation, it's really important to really think through what that very human engagement looks like so that you know that you're automating what should be automated. We've worked with a number of organizations, and whenever we connect with organizations, they typically provide us with what the type of ultimate outcome that they're looking to achieve. And then we start to have a discussion around what they even have access to, right? So we have a case study with one of our customers, Tower Federal Credit Union. They had a challenge where they were doing sort of like a spray and pray method. Everybody was sort of receiving the same messaging, irrespective of what type of accounts they had open, irrespective to what type of purchases they've made within the past year, irrespective to whether or not they have a savings account, a loan on a home. And what they desired was to dynamically segment based off of some of these characteristics. I mean, they understood and they scored customers based off of different data, but they wanted to provide a more personalized customer journey. So what happened was we started to leverage advanced segmentation to one sort of classified these different account holders based off of spending habits, based off of their location, based off of demographic, firmographic information, spending patterns. And all of that enabled Tower Federal to be able to communicate with them in different ways and also to sort of predict on what things potentially may be considered in the future and maybe what offerings could fill a gap within their financial landscape to say, well, hey, if someone recently had a joint account, we realized that they also have a child's savings account, but they don't own a home yet. Now, all of a sudden, you could sort of put together this persona and you could speak sort of a different message to them to lead them so that Tower Federal they would essentially have first right of refusal in the event that someone is considering, say, a mortgage or to purchase a new automobile. Now, with that new messaging, they saw increases in their conversion rates. They saw increases in their open rates as well. So there are, of course, layers to that engagement, and they saw a lot of increase in their open rates. They got a lot more visibility into their member life cycle, and it also freed up their internal resources to be able to do some of the things that otherwise were manual. So as you start to look at how you're managing your human resources, it's important to automate what you can so that they can do the things that could provide the most value to your organization.
Great. That's a great example. Thanks, Mike. So let's talk about some of the common pitfalls that we run into when we try to implement some of these strategies. One thing, of course, is really approaching everything as a one-time tactic. So if you've gathered some data and you want to send out a personalized email, that's great. That'll help. It'll be better than a non-personalized email. But really looking at this as more of an overall strategy where you're framing out what kind of experience and journey you want your buyers to go down based on these different types of demographic intent and behavior signals that you're gathering. So you might have 3 different paths, you might have 10 different paths or more, depending on the complexity of your business. But if you can map those out and then fit your buyers into those paths, it makes it in the end a lot easier for your marketing team to execute because you have the automation in place, you're reusing your content, you're creating content for the appropriate phases of that buyer's journey, and then you're reusing it. So you don't have to come up with new content every week to send out a new generic email to all of your prospects. Instead, you've got this content mapped out in the right stage, in the right industry and the right product line, and you're fitting context constantly into that automation as they qualify for it. So once it's set up, it's always on, and it's a lot. It's easier to manage, and you're just getting a lot more bang for your buck. Over relying on static fields. So as we talked about earlier, everybody can use name, industry, the basics that you've collected about your customer. That's helpful. But what's more important is understanding where they are in the buyer's journey. What topics are they interested in? What behaviors have they exhibited in terms of have they downloaded white papers or case studies? Do they like to watch videos? Do they like to attend webinars? Are they likely to click on calls to action that you have in your emails? If you can start to map things out like that, you can then appeal to customers or contacts with the type of content and the topics that they're going to be most interested in. Of course, to do this, you need to have a really strategic data plan. So a lot of people have data from all kinds of disparate systems that they don't always have access to in their marketing system. Identifying that data and what's going to be helpful for you, especially if you have internal systems that might indicate purchases or product usage or social activity or website traffic, all of that stuff can be really useful. And if you can integrate those into your marketing automation program and your CRM, then you'll be able to use that data for this kind of segmentation, which will be really helpful. And then, of course, you can't just set it and forget it. You want to optimize it. So understanding how to test, how to iterate and refine the performance of these automations is really important. So this is where things like attribution reporting come in. where you can look at what types of content and activities are really contributing to the end goal, whether that be somebody making a purchase or turning into a qualified lead. How do you analyze that and see what's working and what's not so you can continually improve your strategy?
Absolutely. Let's always remember here too. I mean, depending on what business you're in, all of these marketing efforts, a lot of it serves the front end of an overall sales pipeline, right? So we're hyper personalizing this experience to make it, I would say, easier for your sales team to be able to execute on what you know, right? So within that, of course, there's an overarching sales strategy. And then within hyper personalization, there are these micro strategies that can enable you to do this better, right? One of the first things that you have to do is scale with dynamic segmentation. So you have to have a good understanding of what static and dynamic data points you should be considering so that you can create these little buckets of contacts so that you can message them and engage with them very differently. The second thing that you have to do is identify what behavioral based triggers will move you in that direction to actually engage with them. Many of them may require or desire different cadences from a communication standpoint. They're in a different season of consideration. Their role, who they are as a stakeholder may be drastically different. So you have to make sure that you have different triggers for your behaviors, for your engagement based off of their behavior so that you know how to engage with them. And then lastly, you have to have the content ready and prepped to be able to convert them at different stages, right? So you're executing here by creating these buckets, understanding how to engage with them, and then having the content ready to be able to, again, bring it all together and have the right overall narrative so that, again, you're leading them through that marketing and sales pipeline so that when you do have a salesperson that comes in to say, hey, like, are you ready? You've already prepped that entire conversation by educating them and aligning them with what you're ultimately looking to solve for them.
So let's just take this framework and apply it to a really simple example. For example, we work with a lot of manufacturing companies, and so they can create these segments. They can engage with behavior-based triggers. What that means is that you want to respond when the action happens. So let's say, someone looks at your website, they're in a particular use case area or a particular industry, and they read a case study or they download a case study. You can instantly respond with an automated triggered email that comes back and says, okay, here's the case study that you looked at. Did you know that we also have a white paper that goes into more detail about this? Or we've done a webinar that talks about some other similar case studies that you might be interested in. So setting all of that structure up so that when the thing happens on your website, when that prospect clicks on a particular piece of content or shows a particular intent, that your content is ready to go to respond in a dynamic and modular way. That's where the magic really happens.
Now, there are a number of things that power a lot of this, right? So we sort of spoke about the fact that there are certain behaviors that you have to track. Then you're capturing information and you're processing that a certain way. That may be inside of your CRM. That may be inside of other tools that's driving your marketing automation efforts. One really cool thing about Acton is that because we sit in the center of a lot of this, we're able to integrate seamlessly with many other platforms, but at the same time, ensure that certain elements of automation are being executed properly. When it comes to dynamic segmentation, we're doing a lot of that based off of different signals. We're also basing it off of what we know about this audience. We're creating these different channels, whether it's online or offline. Now, one cool thing that we've seen is, and I know a lot of prospects may see this as being like this magical box, right? A lot of it is just, it's automation based off of the right data, right? So you know that there are certain signals that a prospect is exhibiting. You know a few things about them and you understand what channels they came in through. You now have the ability to deliver content through those same channels. So we've seen text messages go out. We've seen emails go out. We've seen audiences be created within social media platforms. And then a direct mail is triggered. So now you're finding all of these different mediums to be able to create these highly personalized campaigns for your audience. And we're able to sit in the center of that to ensure that the right things are automated. we like to say that there are certain things that require smart orchestration. So that's where you're leveraging AI to help you with this processing, looking at underlying data points that will identify whether or not there are trends, outliers, or even cross correlations in some of these behaviors and some of these different data points. And then you have, of course, reporting on all of this. Yes, you can automate a lot of it, but at some point it will require, of course, someone in your organization to look at what's going on and determine whether or not you're automating the right thing. Again, going back to my statement, whether or not you're doing the right thing the wrong way in an automated fashion, or whether or not you're doing the right thing the right way. And so there are a number of mechanisms to ensure that you're doing the right thing the right way. Now, there are, as I mentioned in the beginning, the aim here is to automate things so that you can create a more, I guess, human-like experience, right? Your personalization needs to evolve, right? If you're still using static elements like their name in emails, just know that there's a lot of opportunity that you may be missing because you could be adding a tremendous amount of context to that messaging by automating certain things. In order to do that, you have to have the right data, right? So it's very difficult to have the right message if you don't have the right data, and vice versa. And then lastly, of course, you have to ensure that whatever you're automating is sustainable. Now, depending on what industry you're in, your sales pipeline or your process may be relatively lengthy, right? So you have to understand that you're moving them through this process, you're educating them along the way. But from a sustainable standpoint, you're not only educating them, but you're also building advocates as well. So even after someone becomes a customer, that the marketing doesn't stop there. You still have to consistently and continually educate them and build that relationship so that they begin to advocate for you. And it makes it easier for you to continue extending your sales pipeline.
Great. Well, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I think we're into the Q&A portion. Duasa Mike, thank you so much. That was incredible. And we got some great questions. And so we have a few moments to dive into those. The first question, this is kind of a broad one. What does great segmentation look like? Mike, I know you mentioned Tower Federal, but could you share some other examples of how maybe customers are using segmentation effectively?
Um, Outside of the segmentation piece, I guess I'll use an example on the hyper side, right? So
Hmm.
and I'll stay within finance. I think there are a lot of financial institutions because they have a lot of data on on their members and on their customers. I'll lean into another example there. We've worked with some financial institutions who they realize that there are a number of things that are changing in the marketplace. I mean, you have interest rates that are changing. Of course, you have life events that are changing. And what they did was they said, all right, we have these buckets of people who are in a particular, they have a particular rate for their mortgage. And as the markets change, it presents opportunities for some based off of the season of life they're in. So they started to segment based off of the difference between when someone locked in a particular rate and whether or not there's a significant amount of opportunity in the markets changing. And they
Right.
used that to be able to message those particular audiences very differently. And that unlocked a tremendous amount of opportunity. So that's like one example out of many, just to leverage information that could be changing to
Yeah,
be able to communicate with your audience dramatically differently.
right.
And I want to pick up on something you said earlier, Mike, about how segmentation and this whole concept of hyper-personalization doesn't have to end when the sales cycle is completed and you have turned a prospect into a customer. We're seeing a lot of our customers focusing on nurturing that throughout that onboarding process and also throughout the entire customer life cycle. So that allows you to bring in more information, again, maybe from other internal systems to track where your new customer is in their onboarding, in using your product. Have they installed it yet? Have they started to use it? Do you have any feedback from them? Are they engaging in phone calls or emails to your support department or anything that might help inform where they're at in their level of getting value from the product and in
Mhm.
satisfaction? And then being able to segment and help supplement, whether it's education or reaching out for more resources or introducing them to other new products that might be complementary. All of that really depends on kind of where they're at and how far along they've come with their onboarding. So we're seeing that a lot of customers implement that really successfully as well to help reduce churn and improve customer satisfaction.
Right. With that hyper personalization, right, there's so much data that is available that you could sift through. So do you have any advice for marketers to really like zero in on what really matters, right? To kind of filter through the noise and focus on what's important?
Do you want to take this one to us? I can take it.
Sure. Yeah. So, there's that this is really where good attribution reporting comes into play in good analytics. Because if you can map out your customer journeys and see what's working, whether your goal is to create qualified leads or to get people to convert on a
Mhm.
forum that asks for a demo or pricing, or to close a sale, if you can look at the process that various contacts have gone through and what has been significant in terms of attribution of what contributed to that, then you can really see what's most important. I mean, maybe opening an email isn't that it is just noise at this point, but actually downloading a white paper or attending a webinar is a lot more worthwhile. So typically what we see people doing is analyzing that in terms of, what does success look like and what are the behaviors that have created your kind of ideal customer profile, and
Mhm.
then weighting those behaviors heavily in lead scoring and just trying to capitalize on that to segment on people who are participating in those kind of behaviors or showing that kind of intent.
Yeah, that makes sense. What kind of workflows do you feel that marketers might be underusing, right? When it comes to this idea of personalization?
Well,
That's a
I
good
would
question.
say, like we've talked a lot about automation here, and Acton, for example, our marketing automation platform has an incredibly robust automation platform that lets people really map out these journeys, automate things like, if somebody clicks on the first email you send them, then they're going to get another email down the road. But if they don't, then they're going to go on a different path. You can exit automation and move into another one. They're very sophisticated, but we find people really underutilize the automation in general.
Yeah.
It's still, I think a lot of marketers are still kind of in that, well, yeah, maybe I'll have a simple automation of send one follow-up email if they fill out a form. But to really map out in a more personalized way, depending on their subsequent behaviors,
Mhm.
I'd love to see marketers spend more time on that because I think it's a great time investment that you do it once and you set it up, and yes, it's hard to get all that content in place and everything ready. But then once you have it, you've just got this great workflow that people can work through.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Another thing that we have a great tool for that I don't see people use quite as often is the dynamic content in email. So as you're building an email, you can use criteria right there in the email to vary the content. Even something as simple as I've seen, we have a lot of clients in the healthcare space, for example, and I've seen them vary the images that go out on the email based on the demographic of a customer. So if you have, a young family, they might have an image of people with kids. If have an older person, they might have an older couple in the image. Just, it
The
isn't
the
really
little
any
things.
content. It's
Yeah.
just a little thing that appeals,
Mhm.
like, oh, that's I can relate to that stage of my life. And then what this healthcare facility is telling me about how I should come in for my vaccine or for a flu shot or something. It's just that
Absolutely.
little subtle, like subliminal advertising there. It's someone you can relate to. And so just doing techniques like that, which they can do with the dynamic content modules of the emails, where based on the criteria of what who the actual recipient is, they might get different images or different content blocks. It's a great way to automate that and to make that personalization a little more sophisticated without having to create like 10 different emails.
Yeah, that's an amazing feature. And, those little touches to your point just go such a long way with
Yeah,
customers. So yeah, I have a couple more questions if you guys have the time. This was such an
If
amazing
sure.
if I could add
yeah,
one more,
absolutely.
I would say workflow that's typically that I've seen that's underutilized. So within these platforms, the aim is to create a lot more alignment between marketing and sales. So
Yeah.
like within Acton, you have the ability to automate things on the marketing automation side, but you can also automate certain things that are happening within your CRM as well. So you're sending out an email. you're waiting until, let's say, some engagement happens, you can also automate tasks being created for a salesperson or
Hmm.
a designated or respective salesperson to take the activity of maybe making a phone call or doing some due diligence or doing some personalized direct outreach. So a lot of that within different workflows can also dramatically increase what you're attributing to a particular automated program.
That's a great point, Mike. It just really helps cross that line between marketing and sales and make the teams
Yeah.
work together and bring that salesperson in at the right time when the customer or the prospect is showing engagement.
Absolutely. So what advice, and this is for Duessa or for Mike, what advice would you give, someone or a company kind of just getting started with prioritizing this type of advanced personalization? Like what's the first step? Best practices to kind of start with.
I can
You
start.
want to go ahead,
I can.
Zach?
I'll start.
Don't fight over it now. No.
I'll I'll start. I'll let Duessa kind of tag onto it. I think that organizations should, for one, I think they could enter into this somewhat conceptually, and then at least start to paint not a very vivid picture, but a vague picture of what their expectations should be on the other side of implementing anything. Now, whenever we say that we've interfaced with some people who are doing certain things, there are some who are choosing to leverage a lot of these advanced capabilities, and there are some who are choosing not to. And we're starting to see that some are starting to get left behind that aren't leveraging it. But it's a lot of times it's because they didn't conceptually create some type of expectation on the other side of it. Like, how much revenue am I aiming to increase by implementing this automated workflow? Is there a bottleneck that I'm not aware of that I want to open up because I'm limited on resources attributed to handling that bottleneck? And oftentimes it's a human that's not working until 12 o'clock at night, right? There are certain things that could be automated. I think that if someone's getting started with it, they should conceptually say, all right, well, what should my expectation be from implementing some type of methodology or technology? And then start to reverse engineer it and work backwards to identify what needs to be put in place to actually make that happen, which is like my role in
Yeah.
Actons. I'm a solutions consultant, so I get to kind of geek out with prospects on what's going to enable them to open up these bottlenecks. So definitely conceptualize, and then of course get some consulting.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, and don't be limited. I mean, obviously, there's a ton of data that you want to have, ideally, to do this. And sometimes that can be a bottleneck for people to get data out of other systems, or they need to get an IT project going, or so just get started. Even if you don't have all the data, you definitely have some data. You have, at least in your marketing automation program, you probably have behavior data in terms of how people are engaging with the content that you're doing today. So just trying to put to use the data that you do have in some basic way is a good way to get started and just start experimenting with it.
I love that. I think this is a great question to end us off. How is Acton thinking about the next evolution of segmentation?
Well, we have some really exciting plans around letting, of course, everybody's excited about AI and the possibilities there. And we see that there's a lot of opportunity here for all of this process to become a lot easier for our marketers by using the power of AI first workflows.
Mhm.
So things like setting or just working from a goal. So instead of having to think through all of these bits and pieces about automation, it's like, how can we help the marketers say, I have a goal of I want to attract my audience for an upcoming webinar we're doing healthcare technology. What kind of segment should I create? And have AI tools to help you identify the prospects in your database that are most likely going to want to engage with that kind of content
Mhm.
based on all of the factors we've talked about, their behavior, their intent, their demographics. And so, the AI can crunch that data and come up with the right kind of audience for your goals. That's really where we're seeing the future going here. And then, of course, also, help you create content, help you create the personalization or the variations on things. I think understanding, not only the intent of what kind of topics and content people are interested in, but the style. Is this somebody who likes to read case studies or likes a lot of bullet points or likes a lot of images or is likely to click on a special offer? Those kinds of things as well can be really interesting to experiment with. And we can see AI playing a big role in helping us analyze and segment people based on some of those kind of factors in terms of their behaviors.
Amazing. This was incredible, Duessa and Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and your insight and your expertise. There's obviously your email address and contact information on the screen, so you can reach out to them directly. This recording is also going to be available on demand directly on Acton's website. And you can find this webinar and other related webinars in the content library on Acton's website. So thank you both so much again. And thank you everyone for watching and for joining us. And we'll see you in the next one.